Hello, everybody, and welcome back to a brand new live stream. Make sure you guys like the stream down below. Subscribe if you have not subscribed yet, and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss another stream. It's great to be with you guys tonight on a Thursday. We have a lot to cover over the past 2 days. We've had some new developments in the news that we haven't really got a chance to discuss. I didn't make any videos about them, but nevertheless, I think it's very important that we do discuss them regardless, because they are fairly important, even if not necessarily like the biggest news or like game changing. We're going to talk about Tim Scott, Senator of South Carolina, because he has sort of quasi announced a 2024 presidential bid. No, it's not going anywhere. It probably doesn't help anybody except for Donald Trump. And it might hurt Nikki Haley if she sticks around to South Carolina and he sticks around to South Carolina. It's a sideshow, but some people like the sideshow. So that's what you're going to get tonight. You're going to get a little bit of the Tim Scott stuff. And again, we'll mix in some of the super chats later on. We also saw Donald Trump get interviewed by Tucker Carlson. Apparently a couple weeks ago, Tucker was like the enemy of Trump, according to the news media, because they leaked some alleged text from like 3-4 years ago. That may have been said in the heat of the moment. But no, Trump and Tucker are friends. We know that. And Trump was interviewed and he said some interesting things, but people were hitting him on supporting Gavin Newsom because they're taking clips out of context. Mainly people on the right are being the most disingenuous people possible, so long as they do so to malign Donald Trump. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the 2024 chances. What are the odds that Donald Trump can defeat Joe Biden? What are the odds that Ron DeSantis can defeat Joe Biden? A conversation we've been having for, it seems like a couple years on and off, but ever since the midterms, we've been having it at a greater length, at a greater extent. So we will be discussing that. And we'll see whatever you guys send via super chats. I know there's a lot going on right now in the news. We'll be talking about all of it. 218 live viewers. Make sure you guys like the stream down below as we get started, because we have a lot to talk about. And let's jump in with our first topic right here, right now. The topic of Tim Scott. Tim Scott is a senator out of South Carolina. He has announced his exploratory committee to run for president. And he's been propped up by a select few people in the GOP. Maybe, I guess you could say mainly on online circles, because a lot of people, your everyday primary voter, so far doesn't really know about Tim Scott. And if you're like a total normie out there who doesn't really pay attention to politics, I assume you're not watching this right now. But I would say that you're probably unaware of Tim Scott. Tim Scott has made his name off of being the first black senator to be elected in the South since Reconstruction, who happens to also be a Republican. And that's kind of always been his gimmick. And he's utilized that as his platform to really step up in the ranks. Every single time he gives a speech or talks, he consistently overdoes the identity politics aspect, even though he's a part of the party that claims to oppose identity politics. He never shuts up about it. He will never let you not know about it. That's kind of what he's been able to do. He's been able to utilize that aspect of his identity to kind of gain clout in politics. And I'll actually expose some leaked quotes that haven't really been covered a lot in this live stream for people that just say that I'm just pulling this out of my rear end because it's racist. They say racist. They're using the same leftist taglines. If you accurately call out the fact that he's only being propped up for one reason. And I said, kind of in jest, but kind of true. It's an exaggeration. If you're like a super online autist, of course you're going to take it literally. That's how most of these people operate in the whole neocon / DeSantis camp, DeSantis 2024 camp, I should say. And what I said was that if Tim Scott was white, he'd be working at McDonald's, which again is pretty funny, first of all. Second of all, no, he would not literally be working at McDonald's. He has like an education, whatever. Although so do I. And these are the same people that would say, oh, well, if Trump loses, you only support him because if he loses, you'll be working at McDonald's. That was actually what I was responding to, by the way. They'll never put 2 and 2 together because they're stupid. They're very low IQ individuals on social media. That's beside the point. But what we do know is that Tim Scott has used race in his platform. He's used the aspects of his identity to kind of make himself this affirmative action selection. And that's why he's touting it down the stretch in these speeches, his response to Biden back in 2021. How many times, take a drink every time he says cotton to Congress, talking about his great grandparents or whatever. Absolutely, you would be on the floor within 10 minutes of listening to any single Tim Scott speech. So you can't exactly tell me that I'm wrong. And it's not like he's been good on the issues and like this is like a subtle thing that he does, because I wouldn't care that much if he was actually good on the issues. I wouldn't. The bottom line is he's like not even just your standard Republican. He's very weak and he caves and he virtue signals. He supports BLM essentially, all in but name only. He goes out there and he uses the same type of rhetoric, the same virtue signaling, the same victim rhetoric. Oh, I get pulled over all the time or whatever. All this nonsense. Who even knows if it's true or not, or if he's just virtue signaling to the left? Every single time Trump would say something remotely controversial that was like true, he would bend the knee and say, oh no, this is bad. I got to get in his ear. He's the same person that pushed the criminal justice, quote unquote, reform, the high crime policies that a lot of these leftist mayors, DAs have been supporting. Meanwhile, they're the same people targeting their political opponents and they're letting the criminals run free on the streets. And obviously, Donald Trump signed the First Step Act. He promoted it as well. Tim Scott was in his ear. Kushner was in his ear. Ivanka was in his ear. A lot of people were. Trump doesn't get off the hook for that. DeSantis voted for the first version of it, by the way. He almost certainly would have voted for the second version. So I'm not going to sit back here and say, oh, well, this is like a game changer for 2024. But what I will say is he's weak on crime. There were plenty of Trump justices that Trump tried to push through that Tim Scott held up because Tim Scott said, this is a potentially racist judge. So he's very woke, I will say. He's very woke. Him and Lindsey Graham are a little bit too cozy, if you know what I mean. I'll let you guys look into that to really read between the lines. I'm not saying anything there, but you never know. Behind the scenes, it's very weird that Lindsey rushed to endorse Trump when he could have easily rushed to endorse his very close friend, Tim Scott. But we know Lindsey Graham is like grifting. We know he's like the only one sort of in that corner. But the bottom line is Tim Scott is weak. He's like John Boozman, but pro BLM. He's uneventful. He's very mid. He's just there. That's all he is. He's just there. And I will say that there's only one reason why he's running for president, or he believes he would throw his hat in the ring, or even why he's kind of climbed up in the echelons of politics and has a prominence at all, because of affirmative action, because there's no other explanation. And you see people that say that they like Tim Scott. You ask them what they like about him. They can't really formulate anything. They look at his record and they agree that it's awful. And then you criticize Tim Scott for something, or you say that he's too weak on crime. You're a racist. You can't criticize Tim Scott. Weird, isn't it? Because, you know, the same people that criticize Tim Scott, like Mark Robinson, who's very solid. They were supporters of John James and Herschel Walker and all those people. You know, John James is milquetoast, but, you know, he's serviceable, or was serviceable at the time for Michigan. Doesn't constantly sit there and virtue signal nearly as much as somebody like Tim Scott does. But that's what it comes down to. You have actual black conservatives, people like Byron Donalds, Mark Robinson, and then you have grifters that includes Tim Scott. There's a difference. And there's obviously some grifters that use their identity who are like women. Kristi Noem does this all the time. She was like calling Matt Walsh sexist. Remember that? And there's plenty of politicians that go out there and they do this on the right wing. It's not just black conservatives or female conservatives or whatever. There's a lot of people that use their identity politics to try and gain support. And Tim Scott's one of them. So what I said is, yeah, the guy is weak on a lot of things. He's very generic. He's not really presidential material. You look at what he says in the platform and even on his campaign trail, very vague, like stuff you would get out of Mike Pence, but like not even. Like he's like that level of Republican, arguably worse, because on foreign policy, he's like, oh, Biden administration is bad on the issue of Ukraine. Okay, well, that sounds good on the surface, but then why, Tim? Why is it not good? Oh, they're not giving enough money. They're not giving enough weapons. They're not getting involved enough. And then it's like, You have to be kidding me. Like, no, there's no reason to support Tim Scott, even if it was an open field, even if Trump wasn't in the running, even if DeSantis wasn't in the running. Now, I support him running because of the fact that he helps Donald Trump. The crowded field helps Donald Trump. I don't know if these people know that, or they'll drop out before the primary, angling for a VP position, whatever. But that's pretty much it. What I said on Twitter that caused so much controversy among some very stupid people, but loud, not that many, but a lot of loud people, and mainly paid members of the DeSantis campaign or the troll farm that I've been talking about, that was covered in the Daily Beast, etc. Were using this. They were going out there trying to like say, you're a horrible person for saying this. This is who Trump is employing. I'm not employed by Donald Trump. I wish I got paid by the Trump campaign to tweet. I think that'd be pretty cool, but I don't. A lot of these people likely do get paid by the DeSantis campaign, but that's a whole nother discussion. But what I said is recruiting him to run for president would be a diversity hire. Recruiting him to run for Senate in the first place arguably was a diversity hire. If you're looking for somebody who's good on the issues and is good on his merits, you could throw a temper tantrum like a 6-year-old while you're confronted about this fact, but that doesn't change anything. He's not exceptional. Mark Robinson from North Carolina, which is the less conservative Carolina, but arguably the Republican Party there is much, much better. You know, he's awesome. I would love to see him one day either be VP or president. We know that. And like I said, Tim Scott is a BLM supporting John Boozman with a tan. That's it. What is special about Tim Scott? I'm still waiting on something other than one thing, and we know what that thing is, and that's pretty much it. When you examine his record, it is disastrous, it is woke in many cases, and it is awful. And that is true. And he's holding up judges and justices that were appointed or chosen by Trump to serve on these courts because of, oh, they're like racist or whatever. And like, he's the only one doing it. Like, why is he virtue signaling? What is he doing? No, the guy's awful. And he should not be anywhere near the White House, or honestly, he should not be in the Republican Senate, but the primary voters are not going to do anything about it. And that's that. What I will say is there are plenty of actual Black conservatives, like I've said, like Mark Robinson, Byron Donalds, etc. You can name names, but Tim Scott does not belong on that list. He only cares about low taxes and these high crime policies. He's not a conservative. And honestly, he should be working at McDonald's, which is a part of the joke. And for people that don't actually understand this, this was mainly to get under the skin of the people that have been telling me that I need to work at McDonald's or whatever, because, oh, well, you predicted an election wrong, that we predicted the election the same way. You're bad because you happen to not support the neocon choice for 2024. Wow, really? I don't know. That's my take on this, and it's true. 100% true. And you could say that's skepticism. That's not entirely proven. It is proven. All right, it is proven. Because you'll have people that say, oh, it's racist to say that. It's racist to say that he's used race to advance his career. What side are these people on? Are these people liberals? Are these people Marxists? Are these people socialists, Democratic Socialists of America people? No, these are the people that are trying to choose what people need to be in charge of the conservative party, the Republican Party in this country, that are acting this way and that are using the same rhetoric that the left is using to slander people like not just Trump, but every conservative, including Ron DeSantis, by the way. Does anybody remember the whole monkey this up debacle when he said that? You know, everybody was saying, oh, he's racist. He said this thing. And it's like, okay, whatever. You know, people have used that phrase over history. It's been in TV shows in the past in a non-racial context, but it doesn't matter. They don't care about that. It's mainly just a tagline to, you know, stoke fears and to silence certain political opponents. And that's all it's ever been about, to the point where you don't even have to explain to these people, because you're just wasting your time. You're wasting your energy. But the bottom line does remain the same, that Tim Scott in the first place only became a Republican because there were too many other Black Democrats in the running in the South Carolina House or state House seat he was first running for. This was found in an article where it goes on to say that Tim Scott wasn't even sure that he himself was a Republican. He visited the local Democrat Party headquarters first to tell them that he was interested in running for the open seat. They told him to get in line. So what did he do? He went to the Republican headquarters, where they said, we'd love to see you run, even if you won't win. And just like that, he became a Republican because he was obviously an opportunist. Now you could say, well, he always had like conservative principles or whatever. I mean, maybe there's a lot of like those blue dog Dems in the South at the time. A lot of them either did become Republicans or in many cases they veered off to the left. But given how Scott was willing to just grift on whatever side he could initially, he's doing the same thing. And then he's inserting a lot of this woke jargon and rhetoric and even policy into the Republican Party. And if you call him out for it, he's going to call you racist. His supporters are going to call you racist. So no, you're not a racist if you don't like Tim Scott. You're just like an actual conservative. You're an actual normal person 15 years ago. And if the same rhetoric that he was saying was being spewed by, I don't know, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris or anybody else, people would look at these people and they would say, hey, this is awful. You know, this is just full on insanity. These people don't exactly represent traditional conservative values in any sense of the term. But when Tim Scott does it, it's fine because he has an R next to his name, because a lot of people see him as, oh, well, he's black representation. If we get rid of him, we look bad. We look racist. And it's like you're caving into the same mind frame. That's what you're doing. And a lot of these people that are doing this also happen to oppose Mark Robinson for North Carolina's governor because, oh, he's too controversial because he says they ain't nothing but two genders. And that's the quote in that infamous video. And it's a very iconic one. And he probably will be the next governor in North Carolina, by the way. And I'm not worried about his electability, at least not compared to any other Republican that would be jumping in that race, but that is beside the point. What I will say is I'm vindicated. Everybody who's criticizing this take is operating under the left's moral framework, and that's true. And it's not just going to stop at this. These are the same people that are going to be completely fine with transgender beer cans in about 5 years, and they're the same people that are already going out there and saying, you can't make this an issue, even though it's ironic because the people that they point to electoral success, like Youngkin, Zeldin, DeSantis, all were able to capitalize off of cultural issues in order to win, which is kind of ironic in a way. And they likely, one could say, are straying from that the more time they spend around these donors or the more time they spend on the campaign trail, mainly in the case of Ron DeSantis. And even then, he hasn't I mean, you could look at his record, but I don't want to get into that just yet. We have a lot to talk about tonight, and we will talk about Ron DeSantis and the abortion bill because that passed the Florida legislature. It's now heading to his desk. He's in a massive predicament right now. Obviously, his best political option is to sign it for various reasons, but I think that's enough for the Tim Scott stuff. I'm sure we're going to get some people in the mix talking about it later as well. But the guy's running for president. He has no chance. And you look at his past career trajectory and history, and it's not all been that conservative. It's been very woke. It's been exactly what we have been claiming to fight against for quite some time. But, oh no, it's perfectly fine because of his pigmentation to a lot of people, especially the electabros, the neocons who just want the left to like them more than anything. Guess what? They don't. I mean, Tim Scott being on the ticket, he could headline the ticket. He's probably going to get a less share of the black vote than Donald Trump would, honestly, because for various reasons. And Trump is somebody who polarizes the electorate, opens up the conversation a little bit more. Tim Scott is a generic Republican who has the same policy on a lot of these racial issues that Dems have. And even his electoral history in South Carolina, it's not been all that great among the black voters. He wins every time because, traditional Republicans come out for him. White independents come out for him by a ridiculous amount. He only gets probably around, I think the second time he ran, he got like 9%, single digits of the black vote in 2016. Trump, I think, outran him in the state, ironically enough. So yeah, it's not like running certain candidates of certain ethnic groups really help you electorally either. You could say maybe something like, oh, well, if DeSantis is the nominee, he might do a little bit better than Trump with like Catholics or Italians because he is one. And there may be a grain of truth in that here and there, but those are also more malleable demographics as well. So I wouldn't really say that it's like a factor that's really going to help a whole lot or not. And that's the way it is. So All right. We will be moving on. We have to talk about Donald Trump. We have to talk about the interview very briefly because he went out there and he said some of these governors that he had to deal with. And he said Gavin Newsom did an awful job. And then he said, but he was very nice to me. And, you know, we had like an amicable relationship. And people went crazy because he said that. And it's like, I don't understand why they're making such a big deal out of it. These are the same people that say, oh, well, I want to run somebody like DeSantis or somebody less polarizing because then they're not going to, you know, drum up the opposition so much. He's going to get along with more people, get more things done, etc. Those are some of the biggest arguments you will hear in favor of somebody like Ron DeSantis from a lot of these people most of the time when push comes to shove. But Trump having an amicable relationship with somebody like Gavin Newsom where they wouldn't attack each other a whole lot, even though Trump did attack him and did attack his policies, including on COVID, by the way, from, you know, time to time here and there. It's like, yeah, this is just a disingenuous attack line. There are legitimate things you can attack Trump on, by the way, and I'm not even saying that you can't. And that really kind of goes out there for all of the people that will say, if you support Trump, you're like a cultist. No, there's reservations. Don't get me wrong. It's just the way that they're being portrayed in the light by a lot of these people who don't really have the best interests in mind for the Republican Party or the country, et cetera. That's kind of the issue. That's kind of where the schism really comes into play. But this notion that, oh, Trump went out there and he's like, just praising Newsom. Well, he's praising Charlie Crist. It's like, no, he's not praising Charlie Crist. And then they say he supported Stacey Abrams over Brian Kemp, which, again, he said that in jest as a joke back in the day, back in 2021 when the primary was going on. He did say that, oh, well, you might as well have Stacey Abrams at this rate, mainly pointing to the fact that on the whole like election law change issue, I mean, which it was more Raffensperger's fault than it was Kemp, but he did say, oh, well, you might as well have Stacey Abrams because of the fact that a lot of the election law changes that were lobbied for by Stacey Abrams got into play under Brian Kemp's leadership, even if it was not 100% his fault. And that is true. He endorsed Brian Kemp before the election, which then they'll throw a temper tantrum about as well. And they'll say, well, he didn't do anything. He didn't do anything to help him. He just said his name so he would like get his endorsement record up. And it's like, maybe that's why he said it. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. He was going to win anyways. It's not like Trump saying anything good or bad about him would have hurt, whatever. And then the whole, oh, he endorsed Crist type of thing. No, he didn't. He endorsed DeSantis for governor. Now, some people are going to say like in private, like he voted for Crist, whatever. And it's like, okay, there's the QAnon stuff again. Here we go. Oh, we're going to come up with our conspiratorial things about somebody like Trump because we want to bring him down. So we're just going to like pull this out of our rear end the way the left does. It's like, come on, guys, seriously. But the bottom line is Trump did say, and I covered this in my last video, I guess not everybody's seen it yet, but what I will say is the fact that, hey, I will say that Florida was already kind of growing before DeSantis took over. I said DeSantis has played some sort of a role because he's given the state of Florida a brand. He's very good with public relations. And that's something that Donald Trump himself acknowledged recently, even though he's been attacking Ron DeSantis, is that DeSantis has been very good at public relations. And that is 100% true. And I would not disagree with that whatsoever because it's objectively the way that things are. He's very good at public relations. He knows what he's doing. And in terms of the media and in terms of the brand, but mainly you could say the reason why a lot of people are moving to Florida, it's a mix of that. It's a mix of weather. It's a mix of the economy, which has been doing it was doing well ever since the 2000s. I've always said Jeb Bush was not the worst governor. He also took on like cultural issues at the time, like affirmative action, et cetera, whatever. And we know that. But because you're a good governor, it does not make you a good presidential contender or candidate. I've said that about Ron DeSantis going back all the way to early 2021 at the time where nobody else was talking about it. And that's why I support Trump over DeSantis. One of the main reasons is because of the fact that, okay, you get a few things done at the state level doesn't mean you're going to translate well to the national level where it's a different ball game, different level of competition, different playing field, different issues. And that part is true. But this whole, oh, Trump like supports Charlie Crist, like, no, he said like the state was doing well under him. Like by the economic metrics, it wasn't doing horrible. Florida was hit far less during the Great Recession than a state like Michigan, for example. Obviously, different issues at the time, whatever. Charlie Crist was not somebody who I would want to be governor of Florida in this day and age. He's a total grifter. He's a total clown. Everybody knows it. But this notion that, oh, well, he's like praising the guy makes him like awful. No, it doesn't. And the whole rest of the Trump interview, which again, those two were not mentioned in the interview, but it's kind of getting tied into the whole narrative change that we have to fight back against. But he talked about Biden and his mental incompetency and contrasted himself with him. He talked about Ukraine and what's going on there. And he talked about his foreign policy, which arguably is his number one strong point. And I don't think really anybody could sit back here and fully disagree with that. But it's just like, I don't know why people are so anti this guy running again. They'll say age, but even then, is age really the issue? And Trump had a good point. He said he sees Bernie Sanders and he's older than Biden. And he goes out there and he is like somewhat mentally intact. He's crazy. He's a socialist, whatever. You could throw whatever tagline. He's a Marxist. He's a self-described communist back in the day. Obviously, we know that. Not a good guy, not somebody we would want as president of the United States. However, he's still mentally intact despite being older than Biden. And there's a lot of people that are incoherent that are a little bit younger on the younger side. And I wouldn't want to make them president either. So I don't think the age thing really matters. The electability thing is the main thing that we need to discuss. And then you look at all the polls and you might say, well, the polls were wrong in 2022. I agree, but partially because a lot of right-leaning independents that make up that unique Trump base did not turn out. And there was no operation to use the election system to our advantage. And now Trump has expressed support of that consistently on the campaign trail, even though some advisors have told him not to, or informal advisors, or some little bit people that are a little bit off mentally that might be nice people in his orbit, right? So I'm looking at all this and I'm saying, okay, I don't understand how he's going to lose. He's not overdoing the 2020 stuff recently. He's been comparing and contrasting his admin with Biden. His approval rating was the highest in history, or favorability rating, in April of 2022. And no, the midterms is not why it slid down. It slid down mainly because he was getting attacked viciously by a lot of these right-wing media outlets, and he's still getting attacked viciously. That drop in support was mainly from Republicans. It was not from like independents or voters who are going to sway the election, who care about gas prices, whatever. So I'm sitting back here and I'm seeing the fact that DeSantis is not beating Donald Trump in a primary. He's not beating him. There's no way. Trump has not lost support. He's attacked DeSantis. The attacks have kind of stuck regarding some things like Social Security. A lot of old voters in primaries. I guarantee you at this point, Trump even takes Florida in the primary, unless DeSantis really does something with his political power that he has, which he might do. He is going to do the whole heartbeat bill, which is a little controversial to a lot of people. And we'll definitely talk about that. That could help him in a primary. I hope he does it because it's the right thing to do. I hope he does it. I hope he signs it into law. If he doesn't, you might say, oh, he'll be more like electable in the general. I don't think that's true. Because if he doesn't sign it, not only is he dead in a primary, but a lot of voters that are like the diehard Trump base that some of them might be pro-life, maybe not as much as like traditional evangelical Republicans in the South, which are not really in swing states, by the way, but they're going to sit back and say, look, he's weak on abortion. Like, I'm not going to turn out for this guy. So you have to walk a tightrope. Right now, if it was like a 10-week ban or whatever, I think that electorally, which again, there's a difference between the right thing to do and electorally speaking. But like if he was just doing like a 12-week ban, it probably would help him in a primary. And it would also help him in a general, one could say, or not hurt him in a general. But in terms of the whole debacle, he's walking a tightrope either way. But I think that if he doesn't sign it, it would hurt him in a general too. And that's the tightrope that you have to walk in this game of politics. And that much is very true. And DeSantis is in a tough position because now if he runs, because a lot of Republican, your layman, your average voter, I'm not talking about your Twitter influencer. I'm talking about the average voter, which is something that a lot of the diehard, die-in-the-wool Trump and DeSantis people probably don't fully understand. The average voter likes DeSantis on the Republican side. Whether you like that fact or not, it's true. The average and being a little bit over the top with it is going to maybe have people like scratch their heads. You have to ease them into it. And somebody who is like a DeSantis fan or prefers DeSantis over Trump because they think, oh, like he'll stand a better chance, which is misguided. And we've said why. They also tend to be somebody who is open to Trump, who likes Trump as well. So it's not this whole like black and white thing, right? It's really not. It's not this whole, or I should say, it's not this whole Italian and orange dichotomy. You have to toe the line. I think that there's more diehard Trump fans out there than there are diehard DeSantis fans. And if DeSantis does go out there and runs against Trump and starts attacking him, it's going to be hard to not either be disingenuous or sound like a resist lip. You can't do either or. And that's going to be tough. And his record's going to be exposed. His national record, the time he was actually at the federal level, which did exist. He was in Congress. A lot of probably everyday people don't know that. When that's on the table, then DeSantis is going to essentially be even then more DOA. He's dropped ever since he's gotten closer to announcing his run. He's dropped. And I don't even know if you're going to see a massive bump when he does announce. So looking at that, why do they want this primary to even happen? Because DeSantis doesn't stand a chance in a primary. I don't believe he's more electable than Trump in the general nationwide. I give him credit. He's more electable in Florida. It's going to Trump anyways. Georgia, Arizona, which, again, those two states are probably not even guaranteed for DeSantis. Depends on how divided the party is. While Trump, I think, stands a better chance in Wisconsin. He stayed out of the Supreme Court election completely. The guy ran from Trump. It didn't help the guy. It didn't help him whatsoever. Dems are fired up now more than ever. And it's not because, the opposition is Trump. No, they're fired up for various reasons. And Republicans don't know how to turn out their voters. And that's all it comes down to. We can beat them. You're not going to beat them by sitting back there and just, putting up these weak people and complaining about Trump. No, doesn't work that way. Never has worked that way. Never will work that way. There is a middle ground. Somebody like Youngkin was able to actually turn out the rural areas and perform respectably in the suburbs. He won, though, because of Trump's base came out for him. If you got rural turnout numbers like we saw in the Wisconsin governor's race in Virginia in 2021, Youngkin would not have even come within 3. And that's true. And all the people that want to talk nonsense about, Blumf cost us the Senate, whatever. He arguably saved more seats than he hurt, especially with encouraging Ron Johnson to run in Wisconsin. And you look at that, and then it's like, maybe he actually saved a seat. Interesting. Like I said, the Herschel endorsement, not a fan in retrospect. I covered that in the documentary. Wish I mentioned the fact that he saved Wisconsin in turn, because they were fundraising like crazy in those states. And Mandela Barnes put up great fundraising numbers. And we didn't at the time anticipate that would play as much of a role as it did, because in presidential years, funding matters less. It matters less when Trump's on the ballot. It matters less when Trump's in the picture. Trump was not in the picture. He did 11 post-midterm primary rallies between the primaries and the election cycle, the general. 11. He did 50 in 2018 per comparison. And in many places, 2022 Republicans did worse than 2018 Republicans, especially in these like Rust Belt states like Pennsylvania, down ballot, Michigan, Wisconsin is another example. It's a disaster what happened. But I do think Trump can win in 2024. Some people are not going to agree. I don't see the argument against it or, he's DOA. Because you could say, like 1.6, whatever. His approval rating his favorability rating went up since then. Biden's has tanked significantly. I think it depends on a lot of things. But if the economy performs respectably strong, it's going to be tough, because the whole party is going to be against Trump. The whole party establishment, more so than they were 2020, arguably more so than 2016, and the Dems are unified behind Biden. That's going to be a problem. Absolutely. I'm not saying Trump's a shoo-in. I'm saying he does give you the best shot, but he gets you a really good shot if you actually unify behind him right now and stop trying to just act like resist libs, shit all over the chessboard because, oh, Blumph mean, I believe in eluctability. Whatever. They don't even know what eluctability means. To save their lives, they don't even know what's electable. They take the wrong takeaways from every single loss they possibly can. And then it's just like, oh, well, oh, we lost. We got to get rid of Blumph. It's like, no, you got to get behind the candidate who can win, has already produced results for the American people. It was not perfect, but there are NFL head coaches that screw up badly their first time around and they learn on the job. Look at Dan Campbell, for example. Trump is an outsider. He's never been in that role. He's never been a politician. He picks some bad people. They're right. I've been the number one critic of that. And then they like want to take the mantle away. And it's like, no, but look who DeSantis is hiring. It's all the same people. It's worse people. And they're just like, oh, look, Blumph hired this guy. And it's like DeSantis supported them. He spoke very highly of them as well. A lot of the times those people are endorsing him for president. It's just like weird stuff. They have a very incoherent ideology. My ideology has been 100% coherent. Hated a lot of Trump's hires, still hate a lot of Trump's hires. Not even a fan of everyone in his corner in his campaign, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was in 2020. That's for sure. But then if Trump hires some like grassroots people, they're like, oh, this person's schizo. They're crazy. We can't have them around. So it's like, what is it then? Who do you want Trump to hire then? Because you're not okay with like the super like hardliner based people that are like grassroots. You're not okay with the hires like Kushner. You shouldn't be. The establishmentarian picks that he chose. Like, I don't like the fact Lindsey Graham is endorsing him. I could see why. Trump is rebuking him at the rallies. He's like, I disagree with him on some things, but you know, it's good to have the endorsement of a senator. And in an early state like South Carolina, it kind of is. And that's true. As awful as Lindsey Graham is, he's a grifter, but you don't think Donald Trump knows that? You don't think he knows that by now? He's been a little bit more intelligent with his personnel, and he's lamented some of his decisions. He was not expressing that during his 2020 campaign. He doesn't usually admit his flaws, and they will say that, and that's an argument they've used against him. Oh, his ego's too big. He doesn't admit his flaws. He admits his flaws. They're like, haha, he's an idiot. So what is it? What exactly is it? They don't have any single point of principle other than opposing Trump. That's literally all it is. That's all that it stems from. Their whole existence in politics exists to bring Trump down. It's nothing else. It is absolutely nothing else. What are they doing? Because they're in many cases paid by people who want to return to the days of 2004, which electorally speaking, those days don't exist. We saw that play out in 2008. We saw that play out in 2012, etc. Doesn't matter. It's just insanity what we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But that's the way that it is. And 2024, a lot of things to discuss, obviously. Down ballot, we will look at it, and there's a lot of races we have to cover there, not in the stream, but as time goes on. A lot of people are like mad at Byron Donalds, which is funny because I criticize Tim Scott for legitimate reasons, and I'm a racist, right? I'm awful. I'm fascist, evil, whatever. They're acting like leftists, we know. Then they're going out there and criticizing Byron Donalds, who's an actual conservative, by the way, because he endorsed somebody in Ohio who lost last time, J.R. Majewski, which I don't even think the endorsement is good because I don't think Majewski is that strong. And he's a nice guy from what I can tell. I don't believe he'd beat Kepter. He'd do much better in a presidential year, of course, but Kepter's really an electoral juggernaut. I think that it would take a very strong candidate, very well funded, even with Trump on the ballot. And even if he does better in that district to defeat her, unless you have redistricting and he's redistricted into a very heavily Republican seat that happens to be open, because at that point, yeah, I'm fine with it. But it's like you're throwing a temper tantrum because one congressman endorses somebody running for Congress who, you'll say what you will about his electability, which maybe there's a legitimate reason there, especially in a midterm year, that he could not come close. I mean, the results speak for itself. But the energy spent is throwing their temper tantrum because a solid congressman from Florida happened to endorse some random person who's probably not winning a primary for an election in Ohio that happens to be in a district that's probably going to go blue at the end of the day anyways, regardless of who the Republicans put up. This is not a serious This is not a serious tagline. Like this is what goes on in these people's heads. It's all about just getting Trumpism out of the way, getting populism out of the way. Then you'll point to examples of like actual people that were Trumpian, but maybe like more, I guess you would say, able to go out there and win because they were like objectively better candidates, people like JD Vance. And then they say, oh, well, he was awful because he had to get bailed out, they'll say. But then it's like, he won by like 7. He was not bailed out. He was a little lazy on the campaign trail, and he gets criticism for that legitimately. It doesn't mean that he's not a good candidate on paper. And the fact is, he went up against somebody who was a phenomenally strong candidate, perfectly like made in a lab for the Democrats, basically the strongest candidate the Dems could have put up, not named Sherrod Brown. And he went out there and he trounced him by over 6 points. So yeah, you could say he was bailed out. If the money wasn't spent, the reason why the money was poured in, by the way, was not to help him or bail him out. Vance would have won anyways, maybe by 4 instead of maybe by 7 at the very worst. The money was put there so that Laxalt wouldn't win. It was put there so Masters wouldn't win. It was put there so Herschel wouldn't win because they want to make Trump look bad. That's pretty much all it comes down to. And they knew Vance is probably going to perform like in line with Trump, or even if he won by 10 and campaigned a ton down the stretch, they would have said, oh, look at this guy. He was carried by Mike DeWine. He was carried by DeWine because DeWine is the liberal who got liberals to vote for him. And we could talk about turnout. A lot of Trump's base did not vote in the midterms in Ohio. This is actually true. And you might say, well, how did DeWine? He got liberals on his side because of COVID, among other things. He's an incumbent governor. Incumbent governors have that ability to do that. And we saw that. McMaster's very Trumpy and very MAGA down in South Carolina. He won in 2018 by like 8. He won by like 17 in 2022. And these are all numbers. I know we got to talk about other stuff, and we'll get to super chats right now because you guys have been waiting a very long time. But we're going to get to the super chats. Black Dynamite says Trump 2024 forever, my expletive. Thank you for the super chat. Bad people do exist, says Lindsay X. Scott, first gay black Republican. Yeah, you guys could read between the lines, couldn't you? Allegedly. I will say allegedly. The guy is single. He's like, how old is the guy? He's like 60. He first ran for Congress. He was like saying he was like 45 and like a virgin or whatever. Like that's literally an article written about him that he like was touting. And it's like, okay, I personally, nothing wrong if you're a virgin, obviously preferable before marriage, of course. But I mean, you're 45 and unmarried. Let's just take that at face value. There's a little skepticism breeding there. And the same thing goes for somebody like Lindsay as well. Of course, which is, it is what it is. It is what it is. But we know very well what goes on there. BRGRS says, do you think Trump will do rallies in Montana in 2024 to campaign against Tester? I'm worried that Tester will win if he doesn't. Well, of course. Actually, that's an interesting one because you're talking about rallies in a presidential campaign. I think Don Jr. would be there a lot, actually. I think he'd send out the surrogates because Don Jr.'s like got a house there or something. I mean, yeah, I think he's going to have to. He could go there once. He could go to the West Virginia, Ohio border and rally for whoever's going up against Manchin, even though they should probably win easily. And Ohio, yeah, go to the Ohio-Michigan border. Go to the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. You got to geocentricize the map. And if I was behind like the geography of every Trump rally placement, he would win easily. It wouldn't even be close. And that was, I think, a major problem in 2020 as well. He goes to Georgia, doesn't even go to the Atlanta metro for like a public event once. Like, say what you will about 2020, but there were things that were left off the table regardless. And I think that's one of them. So Real Texan Politics is great for DeSantis to sign the heartbeat bill into law. Great step in the right direction. Also funny to see the DeSimps abandoning him because apparently being pro-life is uneluctable. Yeah, I know. And it's like they say the heartbeat bills are underwater in popularity. They're really not. They're like, if you've looked at the Georgia bill back in the day, like the popularity of it was 50-50. Now, it is true, a ban outright with exceptions is underwater. We live in a very morally depraved society, and you have to work within it and you have to work around it. That's very true. There's a reason why, politically speaking, even if it is the right thing to say or to do, going out there and saying we're going to ban it all in a swing state doesn't play out well. Now, you could use your power in a swing state to limit the number of abortions, restrict the weeks, whatever, move the Overton window. You should, and you need to. But what I will say is that the Overton window needs to move. And I think tying it to like the economic issue, the family, pro-family economics, whatever, is a great way to gain more support for pro-life policies. But that's a topic for like another video. There's a lot of things that need to be done. The Republican establishment doesn't want to touch it, partially because their donors don't really want them to, but among other things. Dallas Sucks 69 says a single guy can't win the presidency. Yeah, not that single guy. I mean, it's true though. You have to have the aesthetic. You have to have the appearance. A lot of like the normal or normies out there are going to look at it and it's like, okay, this guy's like 60. He's never been married. He claimed he'd never even like been with a woman when he was 45. It's not like he's like this like bachelor or whatever, like celebrity kind of guy, whatever, and that would probably have limits with voters as well. It depends on the kind of voter, but your average voter is going to sit back there and be like, no, this guy is just not it. All right. It's not it. Let's see. Yurter says, I live in South Carolina. I know Tim Scott. Let me tell you, he's dangerous. Boomers love him by default. Don't be surprised if it's him and Trump at the end. He will lie and squeeze every ounce of being black that he can. And I mean, it's true to an extent. It's very true. And there's so many people that get the wrong takeaway from this because they've been trained to like say that you can't criticize anybody that happens to be non-white. It's like the old Hank Hill quote. What kind of country is this if I can't hate a man? I can only hate a man if he's white. And it's true, especially on the Republican side, because you don't have a lot of black party leadership in general. That's true. And he's basically seen as somebody, oh, he'll expand the coalition. Doesn't work that way, folks. It doesn't work that way. The DM Production says, I fear Christian voters will turn against Trump, aimed at moral issues over Stormy Daniels. Well, they didn't turn against him because of that in 2020, and I don't think it's going to play a role because the whole thing is so ridiculous in and of itself. I don't think that it's really going to move the needle. I think whatever has been baked into the cake about Trump with evangelicals was baked into the cake the second he came down the escalator. But even then, he's out there doing record numbers with them. I think like his like abortion comments about like Mastriano and Dixon arguably hurt him a little bit more than that. But I don't think either will play a role. BRGRS with 50. Thank you for the 50. Says, what is your thoughts on the jungle primaries? Montana has a bill going through that would create a jungle primary in the 2024 Senate race. So a libertarian doesn't split Republican votes in the general. It sunsets in 2025. I mean, if that's the point of it, I mean, I'm not opposed, really. Especially where you have a lot of these third-party candidates doing well up in these places like the Dakotas. I mean, especially if it sunsets the next year, because it's like, it's a case-by-case basis. I'm opposed to jungle primaries, but in a case like that, yeah, if this helps us and we pass it through, there you go. Because if it's just like Knudsen or Sheehy or whoever, I don't think Rosendale's going to run, but if it's him versus Tester, again, if it was like that back in the day, I don't think that Tester cleared 50 against Rosendale in 20. Maybe I'm wrong in 2018. I'll look it up here. The 2018 Montana Senate race, the Libertarian. Oh, he did, but he barely did. And a lot of the Libertarian votes would likely have gone to Rosendale. And there'll be people that'll say, oh, he can't win because he lost initially. And it's like, that's not entirely true. Although I'd rather have him in Congress. It is a risk. He's a great congressman. Let's see. Mr. Jimmy says, thoughts on the Chris situation from Mr. Beast. Chandler's the only last normal man standing. I don't know who Chandler is. I don't even know a lot of these people in the whole Mr. Beast circle. I will say I don't really know what their significance is, but I have seen the situation. It's sad. It is sad. He left his wife and his child to play dress up, basically. And this is the same guy who back in the day would make jokes about like the genders and did videos about, oh, the attack helicopter meme. Like he was a part of that culture, and look what he is now. I mean, it sells. It really does. It sells. And you could say that it's like the go woke, go broke thing, and that's true to an extent. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. Like the whole Bud Light stock, it's gone down for sure. But will it sustainably go down, or will this blow over? Because it's already been on an upward trajectory. You could say it's gone down, or Anheuser-Busch, whatever, has gone down. Maybe less people are buying Bud Light, and that's true. But you look at it and you compare it to like 6 months ago, it's still in the green. Like they know what they're doing. They have people talking about them. I think you're not going to curb woke capitalism if it's not really with a woke tax or some actual use of power, which a lot of these more libertarian minded types are going to disagree with. But that's the way it is. You're going to lose this battle regardless. You're going to lose this battle to the left. You're going to have wokeism. You're going to have big government, by the way. And that's what's going to happen regardless. So either you use a little bit of it to your advantage and you keep the size of the government and the size of the regulation on the economy smaller than your opposition currently has it right now, or you happen to just get destroyed because out of a principle and let the unprincipled opposition win. So that's my take. Now, the whole like Mr. Beast guy thing, I just think the whole thing is strange and sad. I don't really know a ridiculous amount to comment on it. And then I look and then there's like old tweets of his that he's like into like lolly or something like that. I don't know. It's a very strange situation. Maybe he always had some underlying things he was going through, to put it lightly. But it does seem to be a correlative theme between the two. I'll say that. Billy Walker says Trump Rufus 2024 Unity ticket. Wouldn't that be something? Real Texan Politics says the big issue is that Mr. Beast has well over 100 million subs, mainly children. The fact that transgenderism is being promoted through his channel is dangerous and scary. And I mean, he is a person that has a legitimate following, and a lot of those people are kids, and he doesn't seem to care. Again, this is an issue where 20, 30 years ago was completely unheard of. And if it was heard of, it was laughed at. It was being laughed about on SNL, all of these skits in the early to mid 2000s, back in the Bush era. A rare Bush win, I guess, but it obviously not really in the long run. But what I will say is that, yeah, and he's not the only one or the only example of this. It's pretty much everybody. But you look at these more grassrootsy creators, and maybe he doesn't fit into that category because he's just so big to the point where he's a famous person, regardless if he's like a YouTuber or not. But you would think that like that would be the stopgap measure, but no. And even if you have like edgy people, and I'm not talking about like super edgy or like super political edgy necessarily people, but edgy people in general, like they don't do well on YouTube. Like they will get crushed by the algorithm. They will get their channel taken away nowadays just because of the fact that they don't really vibe with the whole trajectory that the culture has taken on these sorts of things. And that's a problem. There is no counterculture, or there's no real way for a counterculture to even exist in the current culture in many cases. And even these like YouTubers, like I guess one could say like PewDiePie is like the example of somebody who's like big and like an independent creator who's not like fully like woke or whatever. And that's true. But even then, like, what has he done recently? Like, isn't Mr. Beast bigger than him? He's like the face of YouTube now. It didn't used to be that way. I remember when Mr. Beast had like 100,000 subs, he'd read the same word 30,000 times. And like, that was like part of his like charm. That was a part of his appeal, was he was just some like random guy. And he used to give people a bunch of money, and then he still does. And he still does good things, one could say. And there's like these leftists that hate him for it. And it's like the most ridiculous thing in the world. Like, he's paying for people's surgeries. How dare he? He's a product of the capitalist system. Whatever, but that's beside the point. Billy Walker sent a member chat. Says thoughts on Pennsylvania's 24th primary. I assume you mean not for the district, which doesn't exist, but for the Senate race. Don't like Dave McCormick at all. Doubt anyone will beat Casey, but still. I mean, if he's the nominee, is it the end of the world? No, because he's going to get decked and we'll never hear from him again. I don't think he'd drag down the ticket necessarily. And I don't think he'd have a chance in hell at winning. And Mastriano, if he runs, he's not going to win. He won't win the primary, by the way. But if it's him and McCormick, there's a non-zero chance he does. But he's not going to win the general. And I mean, he's a nice guy, but he's not a skilled politician. He doesn't really seem to know what he's doing. And I think that's showcased by his gubernatorial bid. And you can have somebody who's great on the issues, who's perfect on certain things, but if they can't win and they don't know how to win, it's a dead end. And them losing hurts the brand in future elections. And it's true. And I say that as somebody who liked Mastriano, pulled for him, tried to get him as many donations as he possibly could, but I don't believe he's viable. He'll lose by less than what he lost by if it's a federal race with Trump on the ticket, even if he goes up against Casey. He might lose by 9 instead of 15. But, I mean, that's a loss nonetheless. And I don't think anyone can beat Casey, but I don't want anyone being the nominee, whether it's McCormick or Mastriano, who are either going to be rhinos or drag down the ticket. That's what I'll say. So thanks for the member chat. I think it's a very, very interesting thing, but McCormick is somebody who is a total rhino. He's also a carpetbagger, the same way that Dr. Oz was a carpetbagger. Arguably even a more egregious example of one. He was a grifter. He arguably would have gotten more funding, but I don't think he would have won against Fetterman even. I don't believe Barletta would have beaten Shapiro either. I mean, he had a lot of the same branding issues that Mastriano did, but I mean, he could have got more funding. I supported Barletta in the primary, by the way, until like 2 days before, when it was very evident he had no chance. I'm like, okay, say what you will. Mastriano's the nominee. Let's rally behind this guy. But that's pretty much it. Now, we need somebody who's going to be capable of winning a primary in all these races and also a general. We need somebody who's going to be able to be properly funded. We're going to need people that are able to go out there and win. Otherwise, there's just no point. And I'm not being an electabro when I'm saying this, because they want the weakest candidate in general. They want Matt Dolan for Ohio, that even though pretty much anybody could go out there and win in Ohio, especially if Trump's on the ticket. So, yeah, about that. But still, it's ridiculous. Real Texan Politics, his thoughts on the Ohio primary. I'd happily support Moreno or Davidson, especially since LaRose and Dolan are garbage. Well, I think Dolan is in a league of his own in terms of garbage. I could probably live with somebody like LaRose, but I'd prefer Yost. Davidson would be ideal. Both of them would win. Davidson's an overperformer, by the way, outperformed Trump 2020 by a lot. In the midterms, outperformed Vance, I believe. Moreno is a little bit of a wild card, and it's weird because he's been a little bit of a grifter his entire career. And even like some electabros are saying, oh, he's not bad. And it's like, I wonder why. So I'm not sure I fully support Moreno. That's another thing. People said Trump endorsed him. He like gave him praise, I guess. He didn't fully endorse him. I don't think he's going to make endorsements this early unless it's like an obvious thing. But I just don't know. John Waffle, H2P, says the DSM needs to be updated. America has a mental health problem. The fact that these schools are teaching kids that garbage is crazy. Well, the thing is that the left for years was saying, we're not going to come after your kids. We're not going to teach your kids about sex in schools, or if we do, it's like in high school. We're not going to teach them the alphabet stuff. We're not going to like shield them from we're not going to shield the parents from like letting us know that we're teaching them all this. And now they're even going out there and saying that in the case of Terry McAuliffe, that parents have no right to tell schools or teachers what they could teach. And that's one of the reasons why he lost. And that's the Dem policy and platform on that issue. And I think that needed to be talked about a little bit more down the stretch in the midterms. It was the topic of 2021, wasn't really the topic of 2022 as much. It really depended on a case-by-case basis. But F. Marion says, I think something that could benefit Republicans nationwide is a platform of coming up with a rail transport system, not fiscally conservative per se, but could be seen as populist and forward-thinking thoughts. That's like a Yang Gang type of proposal, which I'm not even saying it's like unwarranted, because a lot of nations have this high-speed rail. But I don't really know. I go back and forth on it. Some people are anti high-speed rail. Some people support it. Would depend on how much it would cost, how efficient would it be, who's exactly benefiting from it. All these things matter because we are far behind in the high-speed rail department. But I am afraid that it's going to lead to like more growth in more conservative places, and liberals are going to move. It's a complicated thing, but or maybe not. Maybe it would have the opposite effect because people could just go quickly transport between places. I don't know. Definitely, the airlines would not be happy about such a thing, but who knows? Billy Walker says, I hope Bill McSwain runs for AG in 24, ran a good campaign, could be the guy on the bench who could climb the ladder effectively. I don't know much about Bill McSwain. He was just like there. And that's another thing. The establishment in Pennsylvania couldn't decide who to rally behind. That's kind of why Mastriano surged in the running. It was either like Dave White or McSwain, which to my knowledge, they were not like just awful all around, but they were like mediocre. The reason why I back Barletta is because of the fact that he was this guy who had a very strong record in Congress. He was like a part of that, Gosar Biggs type of delegation. He was like that guy, but for Pennsylvania, very solid, but he didn't really run the best campaign, and his loss was on him. The reason why Trump didn't endorse him is because of the fact that he fell so far behind in the polls he couldn't win. And maybe you could say that's like Trump's ego kicking in, but like Trump knew that regardless, he was not going to win. Should he have endorsed him early on? I mean, yeah, but you kind of got to wait to see how these things unfold a little bit, I guess. That's my take on it. But, that's the way it is in politics. Everybody's going to be fighting. They just can't exactly come together. There's also not going to be a lot of compromises made either. Like when it comes to these safe red seats or safe red states, these are the same people that said, oh, you can't primary them. Oh, you can't primary them. But also if like Trump endorsed like somebody like Tim Scott, for example, they also were like, oh, look at him. He's endorsing the rhinos or whatever. It's like, they're just like the only political like ideology that they have is they want to get rid of Trump and they want him out of the way. And the reason why is because of the fact that they know that he is the bulwark behind a lot of bad things that will re-enter the GOP. You can criticize him for a lot, and maybe those criticisms may be valid from time to time, but also you have to understand where the GOP was before he came along, and especially where a lot of those people are now. Maybe social issues like Bush in his term was like better on like the alphabet stuff. Okay, true. But then you look at what he's doing now and like the types of weddings he's officiating. It's like, yeah, there's no way that this guy would not have caved on the same issue. I think it's just more of a symptom. And now Trump's moving right on those issues too. So, hey, Arnie Hernandez says, what's your view on street vending? Like vending machines on the street. Like, I don't know what that means, or like people just having like food trucks. Cause that could mean a lot of different things. I don't know what you mean by street vending, but yeah, I don't really have a take on that, but that's the way I see it. We have this political war. It's continuing. The midterms were definitely something that they're going to use and hammer home as their talking point. That's why you got to share the documentary that kind of dispels this notion. It really does. Because that doesn't explain Mark Ronchetti like underperforming vastly in New Mexico and like all the people like Scott Jensen in Minnesota. You look at even some of like the formerly like super Trumpian people like Paul LePage who just ran from that record like down the stretch. Stefanowski like veered to the left. And obviously you might say, well, they're going up against incumbents, whatever. Yeah, but their approval wasn't that good. All right. It wasn't that good. If this was a normal midterm year, it would not likely have mattered. And the notion that you could ignore the Trump base or consistently make fun of them, stab them in the back and still win at this point, you can't. Daniel Kelly was not like a Trumpian guy or like super America. Like the only thing you could say is he raised questions or he objected to 2020. And so did the guy who won that they supported in the primary for that state or for the special state representative or state Senate election there. So their ideology is inconsistent. And it's like, you think the Doro girl would have won? Like, no. She would have maybe done better in Waukesha area or the WOW counties because she had name recognition there. I'll give her that. But outstate, the reason why Kelly did so well in the primary was because he had name recognition there. It wasn't like anything else. And they weren't that different politically speaking. And she arguably was more liberal on the things that it's not popular to be liberal on, like getting rid of cash bail, which failed in Madison, of all places. Madison. That's not Waukesha County. That's not even like a Driftless area county. That's Madison, Wisconsin. That is the liberal stronghold, and that's the most raw votes out of any county in Dane County for the Dems. So, yeah. Sam Madsen said, has the Democrats' loss of moderate and conservative rural voters been because of their craziness on social issues, or has the loss of those voters been a cause of their craziness? That's a very good question, actually, and I haven't thought about it too much, but I will say that it's kind of been a little bit of both, because they don't have to cater to the same demographic, but at the same time, they also just have been moving left. I think they use it as an opportunity to even reach further, because they know that with control of the culture, which the left has, they're going to be able to move the Overton window to the left politically as well. And anybody who poses a serious threat, politically speaking, to their agenda, they're going to be labeled all sorts of names: fascist, whatever, authoritarian, because they might think that using a little bit of power the way that the left does may actually be for good, if in the inverse every once in a while. I don't know, but it's true. And them losing these voters has allowed them to move to the left. That part is indisputable. But I do believe that they have lost people based on their craziness as well. But also, I think it's just because of I think it's, one could argue that it's even more of an economic thing, not just like in the sense of, oh, it's like this issue or even trade here and there. I mean, trade is a part of it, but it also does have to do with the fact that they're just elitist. They're pandering to a different group on purpose, because I mean, it's the donor class. They're that party now, which doesn't mean you're not going to have donors on the Republican side, because you will. But it's true. F. Marion says the real question is, when are you running for a seat in the Texas state legislature? I don't know if I will in Texas. I don't know where I'll run. I don't want to seem like a carpetbagger either. But we'll see when that day comes. But I don't think it's anytime soon. It might be 2026. It might be 2028, 2030. We'll have to see. The political climate could be entirely different by then. Some people will say we're not going to have a country at all. And it's like the left works on incrementalism. I don't think that that's entirely true. Nick H. says Rufus and the other DeSimps are on suicide watch now. DeSantis has signed the 6. Did he sign the ban? I think it's going to his desk. I don't know if he signed it yet. But yeah, it's funny seeing them turn on him when he does something good like that. Which, again, you might say it's not electorally beneficial in a general whatever, but it's objectively the right thing to do. Same thing was when he didn't endorse Harmeet Dillon for the RNC, but he gave her kudos, which he was able to outflank Trump on that issue without even endorsing fully. But yeah, that's a good thing he did. And they were mad about that, because I don't know, anybody who's not a dyed-in-the-wool establishment Republican is incompetent and uneluctable, this, that, and the other thing. Yeah, whatever. We're going to have people on the show. We're going to be debating people, not now, not tonight, but very shortly, very soon, because I just can't deal with the nonsense. And I think a little bit of blood sports is going to be good for content, of course. So I think we're going to have to insert in a little bit of drama here and there. Doomsday Machine says a lot of issues today can be broken down to poor responses and mental health. The left is telling people who need actual help to engage in self-destructive activities. This is true. Resolving mental health problems would fix a lot of this. Yeah, the demonization of self-improvement is far right. We've seen that. Articles hitting the gym, fitness is far right. And they try to just attack people that teach people how to improve their lives. I mean, consistently, the self-improvement YouTubers, they get just slandered just for no reason. Even the whole Andrew Tate thing. They don't hate Andrew Tate because they think he's a sex trafficker. They don't hate because they're completely fine with plenty of them in their camp. They don't hate Andrew Tate even because of his past, like, degeneracy or whatever, which it is what it is. They hate him because of the self-improvement aspect. They hate him because he brings like actual masculinity to the table here and there with some of what he has to say. And that's why they go after him. That's why they go after the people that, want to provide actual solutions to mental health, or I guess you would say like depression to a certain extent in certain people, whatever. People that just want to like have affirming sense in just who they are, basically, given a purpose. People that want to actually improve their lives. No, they don't actually want to answer to that. They want to keep these people. And part of it is the pharmaceutical industry as well. And that's arguably one of the reasons why you have this rampant transgender surge. And you look at the companies behind these puberty blockers, et cetera. I mean, it's like, it's an industry for them. It's an industry. Nextler says, I seriously doubt it, but do you think Vivek will bring anything to the show at the primary? No. He's like Republican Yang at best, and he's all over the place. He'll say something decent, and then he'll say something awful. Then he'll say something decent, then he'll say something awful. It's just like the sideshow, which, I mean, Tim Scott, which we talked about, is a part of it, but the only reason why I brought that up is because of just the symbolism behind his defenders, and how it's just like, no matter how valid what you're saying is, Tim Scott even basically admits it, and you say something that's kind of in jest, but partially true. Yeah, maybe not McDonald's, but yeah, he'd be working at his insurance agency or whatever if he was white. That part is technically true. More likely than not, because of the fact that he grifted off of his skin color to advance his career, which he admits. Like I say, watch a speech of his and take a shot every time he mentions it. You'll be on the floor. You'll be on the floor sick by the 10-minute mark. Guaranteed. Don't do it, actually, because I don't want anyone to actually get sick, but you get the gist of it. Matthew Pacheco says, thoughts on Mitch McConnell potentially retiring? Good, but I don't know. And the bottom line is, we can get him out of the way, and it's a good thing, and we'll probably get an upgrade. But the bottom line is, you're probably not going to replace him with somebody much better. You're not going to replace him with a Vance or like a Hawley. You're not going to be able to do that realistically, and I think people need to understand that. As painful as it may be to like admit, but pragmatically speaking, you're going to get somebody in there who's like better, but not by like a long mile. But him going and getting out of the picture, which I don't think he will right now. I think it's his last term, but that would be a good thing. It's been entrenched for so long. Send the turtle back. Send him back. Send him back to Kentucky. He can go in the cave, whatever turtle cave he came out of. Nick H says, do you think Trump would do better than DeSantis in Nevada? Maybe, because a lot of the white voters there that vote Republican tend to be more like non-college white voters than like white-collar folks. But I don't know. I think it's a wash. I think it's 50-50. I think both of them can win it. I think both might even be the narrow favorite if I had to pick. But we'll have to see, just based off of how the state is moving. And if they harvest if they do the ballot harvesting, a snowstorm's not going to hurt Trump the way it hurt Adam Laxalt. So shout out to Vikash Patel. Thank you for becoming a member. Byron Marble says, run in Wisconsin. Ozaki and Waukesha are no longer ruby red and trending blue. I blame WFH transplants from Milwaukee. I don't know what that acronym stands for, but yeah, I mean, it is very true that you have people moving to those places. Also, the Chicago area. I didn't talk about this in my last video, but I meant to. A lot of people moving from there up to Madison. Intriguing. Let's see. Babyface Cowboy says Trump should select Tate as his VP. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think politically it'd be that advantageous either, just because of how controversial he is. But I will say the left hates him for reasons that are illegitimate reasons to hate him. most of the time. And that's true. That's true. What's the real argument? You could say, well, he's like, he had some immorality in his past. And I'll say, I agree. It's not good. Obviously, nobody's perfect, but pretty much every single member of the culture that's a part of the current culture has that, and then even worse. And it's like, okay, to the point where if this guy's bringing good things to the table, it's a net positive. Obviously, he's not the end goal. Obviously, he left Christianity. He joined Islam. I'm not the biggest fan of that because I am a Christian. I'm not a Muslim, obviously, but I will say that overall, talk about net positive figures. Yeah, he's better than what is the general pervasiveness in the culture. And at least as of late, he's preached against some of that degeneracy. Obviously, the whole haram tweets, he's like, haram. Everybody's seen those, and it's pretty funny, but is what it is. Nick H says, I'm convinced Meatball loses Macomb County. See, and this is the other thing. It's like, you may poke some fun here and there. Like when the DeSantis people attack Trump and they like try to like do the name calling thing, it's like, what do they come up with? They use the same like insults the left does. If the right does it, it's like Meatball, Governor Meatball, Meatball Ron, which is a funny nickname objectively. Trump didn't actually come up with that. That was kind of like a conceptualization type of leak to my knowledge, but it's just funny. It's funny because the guy is got like a round face and he can kind of get red in the sun. He's in Florida. Like, it's funny. Meatball Ron. I think it's better than DeSanctimonious, honestly. When people are like, it's offensive to Italians. And it's like, if you're Italian and you're offended over like somebody calling their political opponent Meatball Ron, it's like, seriously, like Italians also tend to be like the people that are down with like the ethnic humor more so than not. And you might say that's like conditioning that a lot of these like, ethnic jokes that Europeans are like normalized, whatever. And it's like, that's not the point. Like, it's just kind of funny. But like, that's funny. And I don't know if he'd lose Macomb County, but him like having relatives there doesn't mean anything. Mitt Romney didn't like win Oakland County or win Michigan because he literally grew up in the Rust Belt, and his father was a popular governor of Michigan back in the day, back in the 1960s. But he was very elitist. Mitt actually was. He was very elitist and out of touch. And guess what happened? He was not able to win. So, yeah, about that. But I don't think he'd lose Macomb County at a presidential year with presidential turnout unless there's like a ridiculously like divisive primary with all these defectors and the Trump base just stays home. And then they'll like blame Trump for the election. It's like, you literally provoked the beast. You ran somebody against him when he was the obvious front runner, and you likely had to lie and dump hundreds of millions of dollars into the primary. I don't think it's going to work. I don't think he's going to be the nominee. But him taking the back seat and endorsing Trump will be the most advantageous thing that he possibly could have done. And I don't understand why it's like, oh, he has to go now, because he's not going to win now. They say, oh, he'll be forgotten by 2028. I mean, he might be to an extent, but if he runs now, he has no chance. In 2028, he could position himself to be that guy. He can't do that right now. He just can't. I mean, that part is true because he's not getting through this primary. He's going to go down as like Ted Cruz Jr. And it's not gonna end well. Best case for him is he'll be viewed by the base the way that Ted Cruz is viewed by the base now. That's it. That's the way I see it. And some people are not going to agree. That's fine. Chad is talking about VPs as usual. But yeah. I've never dealt with more like neurotic people in my life until I've come across the whole like the insider paid influencers for these like neocon candidates. A history guy says, thoughts on the Arizona Senate race. Can we win even if the establishment is going to sabotage or even endorse Cinema over Gallego? I mean, yeah, I think we could win with 46 or maybe even like 47% of the vote there. Cinema's getting a lot of donors. Gallego is obviously going to have his far left base. He probably would have beaten her in a primary to begin with. That's why she became an independent. I don't think it's going to save her, but it's going to be interesting. There's a lot we just don't know. I think it can be won by a lot of different people. I'm not somebody that's going to say, oh, we have to run this like Rhino. By the way, running a Rhino is not going to do anything. Just throwing it out there. Let's say they run like Meghan McCain or somebody like that. Ridiculous pick, right? Okay. I feel like a lot of the Trump base would probably even consider voting for Sinema over her. And they do exist in Arizona. People think the average Arizona Republican is like a McCain voter. Like, there is a portion of the electorate who are that Republican voter that can sway a general. That part is true. But there's a reason why Trump won the primary in 2016. There's a reason why Kari Lake won despite being vastly outspent in the primary. There's a reason why Masters also. So, yeah. John Waffle says, who's the best upcoming candidate for Pencil? I don't know. Doesn't seem like a viable candidate's really going to step in, which again, I don't think that a viable candidate would even be that viable against Casey. So we'll see. Zachary Marintet says, don't worry about us Italians. We're far too concerned with people snapping their spaghetti and putting olive oil in their pasta water. It's true. It is true. Like this whole, Trump like attacking him or saying you need to go back and work at a pizza shop or whatever. They're like, this is racist. Like the same taglines that the left and the resist libs and the Marxists use against conservatives. It's like everything you say that might be remotely funny, that also might be slightly ethnic themed or somewhat loosely ties into stereotypes. It's like, you're evil, you're racist, whatever. It's like, okay, whatever. Like, we don't care. It's funny. Ethnic humor is not wrong. It's the backbone of our republic. It's been. You would not have survived in the early 2000s. You would not have survived. Not have survived South Park and Family Guy and Rucka Rucka Ali. You would not have survived then, which is ironic. And that's like the meme. Like, it's like kind of like a normie con type of like tweet that if you tweet it out, it'll get like 100,000 likes. But to a certain extent, it's true. But like that's the bottom line. Like even the normie cons are looking at this saying this is ridiculous. And then the average like disimp or like die in the wool neocon is going to use that as like the attack line. It's like, you're a LARPer. You're just dumb. It's like they're also mad that Trump said like Youngkin's name was like Young Kim, or that like his name sounds Chinese. It's like, okay, I thought that was a little bit out of pocket in terms of like that came out of nowhere, but it's not offensive. It's funny, kind of. It wasn't even that funny, but it was not offensive. So let's see. Matthew Pacheco said John McCain single-handedly destroyed Arizona. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say he destroyed Arizona, but I think that like the legacy buildup of McCain is just dumb. Like the fact that so many people are holding on to that. It's like he lost a presidential election. He sank the healthcare bill, which again may not have been the greatest bill, but probably would have been a lot better than Obamacare. Everything would have been completely fine. He would have supported it had any president not named Donald Trump be signing it. But instead, he decided to go out there and just stab Trump in the back for no reason. Yeah, whatever. He is an awful warmonger, and I don't have to sit back here and be nice to him because he happened to be a notable member of the Vietnam War while he was serving. It's like, okay, you did something good. Doesn't mean that everything you do for the rest of your entire life needs to be golden, and we need to just look at you and metaphorically worship at your political altar, because we're not doing that. And so many neocons do. It's ironic that a lot of the people that vehemently opposed him in 2008 now revere him. He's probably more approved of Obama voters than his people that even pulled the lever for him back in 2008, which is the most ironic thing of all. Nick H. Barris says that Trump is winning voters who make less than 30K in his polls in the first time. Barris has lost a lot of, and I don't say this, I'm not exactly saying this because I don't respect him anymore, and that's not true. But what I'm saying is a lot of people will say he lost a lot of credibility with the midterms, and I think a lot of polling did. I think I would be lying if I said I didn't, which I don't think it's my fault. I think that now we could look back and understand the reasons for the underperformances, but I mean, we got to get a good operation, or I'm not just going to sit back here and look at these polls and say, okay, they're right. Maybe they will be if Trump's on the ballot. I don't know. We'll have to see, but I'm not taking polling as gospel. John Waffle says, I made a poll about McCain on Twitter. It's now 50-50. Oh, I mean, depends who's retweeting it too. Or Watkinski says, you think DeSantis will peak since he wanted to cut Social Security and Medicare while in Congress and just signed an abortion ban? I mean, like, the abortion ban thing I think is overblown. Because even if it was going to hurt him electorally, which I don't believe it really would, and if he doesn't sign it, it would, he probably would just say it's a state issue anyways. I was just governor of Florida, whatever, New York can have their laws, even though they shouldn't have their laws because their laws are barbaric, but is what it is. I will say that DeSantis's stances on entitlements will inevitably doom him in a lot of different places among, well, I guess you would say older voters in a primary. And Trump, even though he was getting hit hard for that in 2020 on the campaign trail, he can now revamp his image by being the guy who goes out there and attacks DeSantis for it and says, I will always protect Social Security and Medicare. That tagline plays well, even though he'll still be hit for it in general. It's not going to hurt him as much, and it probably could help him on the issue, pull some voters away. The average voter, like the average swayable voter, which they're not that big in number, is not like opposed to Trump, but they'd crawl over broken glass to vote for Ron DeSantis. A lot of them care about these economic issues, and arguably Trump straying from his OG message a little bit here and there was what doomed him more so than literally anything else. And as the more that he returns to form and returns to that, the more emboldened in the support of him I am, especially given the fact that a lot of the people opposing him tend to be the worst people possible and the same type of people that subverted him during his administration that I was opposed to. So, yeah, about that. President Gilbert says, do you think the establishment will attack DeSantis if he doesn't run and runs against, if he doesn't run against Trump, they're going to lose their mind. And it's going to be hilarious. They're going to lose their mind, which again, he will. It's evident. The writing's on the wall. He's almost going to. It's almost certain. Real Texan Politics says Rufus is having a mental breakdown over DeSantis signing the bill, which makes sense since Rufus is a pro-choice atheist who supports abortion. He's like Asian Richard Spencer, basically. He is like pro-eugenics. He's pro-abortion. He's like I don't know. He's just like, it's ironic. The same DeSantis people were like, turn a blind eye to some of these people, and they'll get mad at me because I say Tim Scott needs to work at McDonald's. He should. He needs to go to McDonald's, go work at McDonald's. Given his track record, it's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Don't care. Doesn't matter. I'm not going to do this whole like, oh, I'm going to like virtue signal game and say, oh, I'm like the real, I'm the real, like, you're the real racist type of thing. But I will say it is funny though, that like some of these people say all these like ridiculously just downright like off color things and, oh, it's okay. Oh, you're such a silly boy, Rufus. Yeah, whatever. I don't care. Doesn't matter. But I do think it is funny, though, that you have these people that are having mental breakdowns over the fact that their candidate is like, now they're even saying, oh, he's going to be less electable than Trump. That was always the case, you morons. At least in the Rust Belt. At least in the Rust Belt. Because I will say that in like these traditionally Republican, yeah, he might do a couple points better in Arizona and Georgia, but not a ridiculous amount, though. These states are changing demographically. There are trends that are irreversible. You could say, oh, well, the average white college-educated voter that voted for Romney and then voted for Clinton, they won't vote for Trump. But it's like, but they approve of those people. Maybe not Clinton so much, but they approve of Biden. They approve of a lot of people that are on the Democrat side. It's not like DeSantis is going to be able to win them over at the end of the day. The left, some people will say the left wants to run against Trump. I mean, there might be some super PACs that agree with that, but there's also some people that don't want to run against him. There's some people that really don't. So it's not all what they think it is. But Let's see. We're gonna end the stream in a second because my mouse battery is getting low, and we definitely don't want the mouse to die on stream. And we've gone on for longer than I thought we would. So if you have any last second super chats, feel free to send them in, like in the next 15 seconds or so, and then we will end the stream. But it's been a very good stream with you guys. We've had about 450 people in chat. Make sure you guys like the stream, subscribe if you're new as well. Nick H says it's hilarious how Rufus always calls people low IQ. Yeah, it's like, who even is Rufus? And a lot of people still asking that. There's this guy on Twitter who is very obnoxious with his Trump derangement syndrome, and he's a lol cow. We milk him for content because he's just, his existence is pretty funny, and there's just no other way around it. Mike Lucas says Tim Scott's better than DeSantis. I disagree. And I personally think that DeSantis, I think lower of him at the national level than I did a few months ago. But I mean, they're just a part. I'd say Tim Scott's a part of that same donor class type of Republican that's getting to DeSantis, wants to pull him up to the national level to get rid of Donald Trump. But all right, guys, we're going to end the stream. It's been a real one. Like the stream before you go. Subscribe. Hit the bell before you go if you are subscribed so you don't miss future videos and streams. And I will see you guys in a video tomorrow. Red Eagle, out.